You ever watch a movie and think, wait, was that brilliant? Or just a total train wreck? That's exactly how I felt after watching the Forever Purge. It's wild, chaotic, a little too on the nose, but somehow, it might be the most important Purge movie yet. Some folks call it lazy, others think it's prophetic. But here's the twist. This film might have accidentally told us more about our world than it meant to. Is it a failed sequel, or a chaotic masterpiece in disguise? Stick around, because we're breaking down what the Forever Purge actually nailed, and what completely face-planted. You might just change your mind. Alright, before we start pulling this movie apart, let's quickly set the stage. The Forever Purge dropped in 2021 as the fifth installment in the Purge franchise. And this one hit different. Instead of the usual 12 hours of lawless chaos, and then everyone goes back to brunch. This time, the Purge doesn't stop. It takes place the day after. People refuse to follow the rules. The so-called Forever Purgers want permanent violence, permanent cleansing, and yeah, it gets ugly real fast, real quick. Now, up until this point, the Purge films always kind of flirted with social commentary. You know, class divide, racial injustice, corrupt government stuff. But the Forever Purge, it grabs all of that and cranks it to 11. It says the quiet part out loud, with zero subtlety. The setting shifts to Texas. Immigrants become central characters. The violence is racial. The villains are nationalists. And suddenly, you're not just watching a horror action flick. You're watching something that feels uncomfortably close to home. Some thought that was bold. Others thought it was heavy-handed. Either way, this film definitely had something to say. And we've got to talk about it. Let's get into what the Forever Purge actually did right. Okay, let's start with some credit where it's due. The Forever Purge actually brought something fresh to the franchise. First off, the concept. Taking the Purge beyond its one-night-only rule, genius. It taps into this terrifying what-if scenario. What if people didn't want to stop? What if the violence became a lifestyle instead of a one-night purge? That idea alone escalates the stakes in a way we hadn't seen before in the series. The Purge was always about lawlessness with boundaries, but this time, the boundaries are completely shattered. Then there's the social commentary. Yeah, it's heavy-handed, but you can't say it's not relevant. The movie takes a swing at America's obsession with violence, nationalism, racism, and xenophobia. And sure, it's not subtle, but let's be real, neither is real life these days. It's like the writers looked at the headlines and said, let's just film that, but bloodier. Plus, centering immigrants as the protagonists, that was a smart move. We've seen the Purge through the lens of wealthy elites, average citizens, and survivalists. But here, we're watching from the perspective of people who are already marginalized and endangered even without the Purge. It adds a new layer of empathy, urgency, and honestly, discomfort. And that discomfort is the point. Visually, the film looks solid. The wide, dusty landscapes of Texas give it almost a Western vibe, which fits the lawlessness and chaos perfectly. There's a grit to it. You can almost feel the heat, the dust, the tension. That Western aesthetic isn't just for show. It reinforces the idea that this is a new frontier of violence, where the old rules don't apply. Also, I gotta shout out the tension. Even if you didn't love the story, you can't deny that there are moments where the suspense is dialed up perfectly. The sense that no one is safe anymore, not even after the sirens, that's chilling. And let's not forget the action. If you're here for the thrill, the Forever Purge delivers. Gunfights, chases, brutal kills, it's all there. And it's executed with just enough flair to keep you watching. So, yeah, despite its flaws, the movie dared to evolve the formula instead of giving us another Purge Night copy-paste. That's a win in my book. But of course, just when it starts to get good, the movie stumbles. And trust me, we need to talk about that next. Alright, now let's talk about where the Forever Purge drops the ball. Because, yeah, it definitely does. First off, the characters. I mean, come on. For a movie that wants to tackle big heavy themes like racism, nationalism, and immigration, the characters feel weirdly thin. They're more like symbols than actual people. Juan, Adela, Dylan, they've got potential, but the script barely lets them breathe. I wanted to care more, but they feel more like they're ticking diversity boxes than being fleshed out humans with real messy emotions. And then there's the pacing. The first half of the movie is actually pretty tight. We're introduced to the characters, the stakes build, the concept of the Forever Purge kicks in. And then it kind of just drags. Once the group hits the road, it becomes a bit of a repetitive road trip of violence. It's like hide, shoot out, escape, repeat. By the third time, they're cornered by purgers. It's like, okay, we get it. America's a nightmare. Another big miss? The villains. Don't get me wrong, the Forever Purgers are terrifying in concept. Extremists who reject the idea of the purge having rules, but in practice they're just faceless bad guys. There's no real standout antagonist, no one you love to hate. That makes the threat feel generic. If you're going to tell a story about ideology gone wild, give us a villain who personifies that ideology, not just randos in skull masks. Also, let's be real. The social commentary, yeah, it's there, but it's about as subtle as a brick to the face. The dialogue sometimes feels like it was ripped from a Twitter thread. I'm all for movies having a message, but it's gotta be woven into the story organically. Here, it sometimes feels like characters stop mid-chase to deliver a PSA. And lastly, the ending. Without spoiling it, let's just say it tries to leave things on a hopeful note, but it feels rushed. Like they remembered, oh right, we need an ending. The resolution doesn't hit as hard as it should, especially after such a brutal ride. So, yeah, the Forever Purge has big ideas, but it stumbles when it comes to execution. But that brings us to the real question. Why did it divide audiences so much? We'll get into that next. Here's where things get spicy. The Forever Purge didn't just divide audiences, it straight up split them down the middle. On one side, you had people who thought it was a bold, unflinching take on America's darkest impulses. They praised the film for daring to go political, and for showing what happens when extremism is allowed to spread unchecked. If you're into horror that tries to say something real, this movie hit the mark. But on the flip side, a lot of folks felt the messaging was too in your face, like the film was yelling its themes instead of weaving them into the story. Some critics argued that it tried to be both an action thriller and a political allegory, but ended up doing neither especially well. Then there's the timing. Released in 2021, not long after a period of real-world political chaos, the movie hit a little too close to home for some viewers. For others, that's exactly what made it powerful. The result? A movie that became more of a Rorschach test than a traditional horror flick. What you take from it kinda depends on what you walked in with. So, what does the Forever Purge actually mean in the grand scheme of things? At its core, this movie isn't just about violence. It's about what happens when a society builds its identity around fear, anger, and division. It's basically a warning. If we keep feeding hate, eventually, it's not going to shut off at sunrise. It'll become the new normal. Sure, the film is over the top, and yeah, it's got its flaws. But there's something unsettling about how close this fictional chaos feels to our real world. The idea that people might reject order because they've become addicted to control or believe violence is justified in the name of cleansing. That hits different when you've seen headlines that feel eerily similar. The Forever Purge asks a chilling question. If we normalize brutality long enough, will we even recognize peace when we see it? Or will we just keep fighting because we've forgotten how to stop? It's not the most polished movie, but it's ambitious. And even if it fumbles in places, the message lingers. The world of the Purge isn't as far-fetched as we'd like to believe, and that might be the scariest part of all. So, was the Forever Purge a misunderstood gem, or a missed opportunity? Honestly, maybe a little of both. It tried to evolve the franchise and make a statement. And even if it stumbled, you've got to respect the swing. But I want to hear from you. What did you think? Did it go too far? Not far enough? Was it the boldest Purge film yet, or just a mess with good intentions? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and hey, if you're still watching, you must have found this interesting. So give it a like, maybe share it with a fellow movie nerd, and don't forget to subscribe for more pop culture breakdowns just like this.